Welcome all to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I'm your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders. I'm the Community Relations Manager at AccessiBe's and a passionate disability rights advocate and attorney, focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today, we are joined by Kevin McDaniel at acceessiBe's.com. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, how are you, Josh? Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm very excited to have you here today, and I know the audience is excited to learn more about you. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Josh. Again, I'm Kevin McDaniel. I've spent most of my professional career in disability rights, in the disability rights field. I previously served as division chief for disability services in the City of Jacksonville, and then most recently as the ADA project manager for the City of Colorado Springs, and now as editor-in-chief for acceessibility.com. I got into this business right around the time my daughter was born. She was born with a speech communication disability, and at the same time, a nephew of mine, as well as one cousin and four of his children, also born with autism, fell into the field, and I just love it. I love the work, and I love the opportunity that it presents.
So with acceessibility.com, tell us kind of what you guys are all about and what type of work you guys do.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about that. Accessibility.com, when we initially began to work towards, and our mission is to provide objective and trustworthy information about accessibility. We see our role as providing objective content. The idea for me, I joined them last year as editor-in-chief, and what really drew me to the organization was that, in my role as division chief in Jacksonville, and I did some consulting work in California and then here in Colorado Springs, the thing that I really found was that coordinators and accessibility professionals, in my opinion, and I may be the outlier, I don't know, but in my opinion, I've just strongly felt that you go into this job and you're really excited about having the opportunity to make a difference, to make a change, to contribute, because we all have our own stories. We all are impacted in different ways. But when you get into the job, what you actually find out is that knowing the laws and knowing the regulations and the aspirational best practices isn't really enough. What happens is that you work closely with your community, you try to identify solutions to real barriers within the organization, and then you find out that it's just not enough. You have to go further. There's stakeholder management, project management, understanding the two realities, what it could be, what it will be, or what it should be, what it could be, and ultimately what it will be. And that's a very delicate dance, at least in government. And so it drew me to this organization, which I really believe in. And their mission is just the desire to provide those tidbits, that additional content for the folks doing those jobs every day. We publish content that is intended to just add that extra edge. That's the idea. I'm imagining an ADA coordinator, an accessibility professional, waking up in the morning and drinking coffee before they go into a meeting where it's them and 10 stakeholders, and they're trying to implement some new initiative. And I'm hoping that they read one of our articles and found a best practice that they can use that morning. Always just trying to keep folks sharp,
What I love about accessibility.com is you're having the right conversations, you're raising awareness, you're bringing information in front of people so they can learn and then have better conversations and teach the world and the people that are around them. So much about accessibility is just the fact of education, just giving people the opportunity to learn what it really looks like around them. What is accessibility? What are the problems of today? What are things we can do to proactively make a difference and change everything that we want to do to make a better world in front of us? And I think accessibility.com has many different parts of it. So tell people about all the different sections and conversations that accessibility covers, from the law to just the day-to-day. Just tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the thing that we're focused on most is, of course, trying to bring that type of content and training to our audience. So at this time, let me go back. I want to just throw something out there that I think is really important. When I was in Jacksonville, one of the requirements of one of the settlement agreements we were in was that we provided a training program for all employees: disability sensitivity, customer service, effective communication in law enforcement, public notice. All of those things had to be provided to our employees, including things like design guidelines and things like that for IT. And just kind of an inside story, it was one of the things we're managing all of these requirements in this very large $100+ million lawsuit. And I'll never forget it when at one point it came down to being able to acquire the appropriate training for all employees. I think that we ended up settling on the ADA building blocks to satisfy a lot of that, which, if you're familiar with, comes from the ADA coordinator network. But the issue, and it's a great training, but one of the issues was that it's about 8 hours long. And so getting 20,000 employees to sit through that was fairly difficult. So, it's, yeah. So it's just those little things that we don't think about. And so we're focused on building out those kinds of training programs, some of the smaller tactical training programs that we think will actually help people resolve these issues and find solutions. Right now, this year is a big year. Obviously, it's the 50th anniversary of the independent living movement. So we have an entire series where we'll be interviewing members of Centers for Independent Living, such as yourself, and also providing content on barriers to independent living. And we do have much more. I'd like to get to our conferences too, but I just want to enumerate the reasons why the independent living movement is important and why we decided to go with that series. For one, what I found in managing projects and trying to implement accessibility initiatives in government was that you can't be subjective. You can't say, my name is Kevin McDaniel and we need to be WCAG 2.1 compliant because I've researched this issue and it's the best thing. That's not how it works within the organization, at least. And I know that a lot of the folks who will hear this are probably high level, C-level, but the folks within the organization who are actually doing the work, they have to create a catalyst, and they have to have objective data to make their case. And so the thing that I found that was most important to me in my entire career has been my relationship with the community. Because, and selfishly, I'm not going to, of course, it's the right thing to do. That's the most important thing, is that no solution is complete without your community's input. But what I found, and this is just my own personal thing I'd like to get to everyone doing this job so that they can be more effective, is that you are stronger when you're not one. When you have engaged your community and you have identified the solutions that are most appropriate for your community, and you've now taken them back to your leadership, you're not just saying, hey, Kevin said we should be 2.1 or we should be 2.0 or we should remove this barrier in this facility. I went to my council, I went to my community, and we identified solutions that are unique to our customer base or our community. And based on that and research from other settlement agreements and all these other data points that you pull in, you then can take a solution back to leadership that isn't yours. And it's really just so important that it's not your solution. Dale Carnegie used to say, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So every time you take this, it's got to be this, it's got to be this, they're going to say, that's great, but you haven't really produced any reason why it should be, other than that's your opinion. And you can't, by yourself, you can't overcome the barriers within an organization alone. You just can't do it. And so it's not just the right thing to engage your community, but it also helps you become a more effective advocate because you're not alone. And so we wanted to highlight the importance of the independent living movement and encourage our readers and our viewers to continuously engage with their community, because we really believe it will make them more effective advocates. So that's 2022 is a big year for that. And then also, we have our Accessibility Plus conferences, which will be a monthly conference focused on different parts of the industry and different accessibility issues within the industry. In May, we'll be doing a piece on education. This month in January, which I would encourage everyone to go and visit our website and sign up for. We still have opening, even though the registration has been phenomenal. This year will be focused. January will be focused on digital accessibility, digital lawsuit, digital trends in digital accessibility lawsuits, and then in February we'll move to customer service, which of course is so important because, and people may say, well, it's just customer service, but customer service is actually, to me, one of the keystone in accessibility because, in my mind, to make an accessibility initiative work, you need, executive support, you need a mandate, you need leadership, you need training, you need to ensure that all of your guides and your manuals have been updated. So I guess that, it's more training, procurement, and all these other things that go into the standard type of maturity model. So customer service is one of those ways that you can start that accessibility conversation. Hey, how are we treating our customers? Are our customer service agents trained? We can't put out a policy that says you'll do this and not give them the resources. So for me, January and February are really, they kick off this idea that these are key components to ensuring an accessibility initiative is successful.
I love how it's not just a conference with all these topics all at once, but rather it's spread out throughout the year. So you
Right?
can keep the conversation going,
Yeah.
digest it every month, take something new in, and be able to think about it and do more with it. And it's just having that conversation every single month. Like I would love for that to exist forever and ever because we can keep learning from each other and keep talking about the issues of the day and what we can do better and what matters. And
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, and we decided to do it that way because last year we had our first conference, Accessibility Plus 2021, which was, I've been doing this a long time and I've held a lot of conferences. In Florida, we would open up our conferences to all of the South. And, for what we did, 300, 400 participants was, record breaking. It was incredible. But last year, at 2021, we had thousands, from Australia to Europe to South America. Every continent was there. It was really, really great. I mean, the feedback and I wrote an article on it, and I probably went a little over the top, but I can't. They're all facts. These are all direct quotes. People really seem to connect with the idea of having the opportunity to hear from industry experts. They can talk about lived experience, and professional experience, and having the ability to ask them direct questions that impact them. And we had education professionals, government, Title III entities, you name it, and they all had really good questions. And it was kind of like I said, as I suspected, because I just found that in this business, we're trained to understand the regulations and the guidelines, but we're not necessarily trained to implement them. And I have to thank my mentor, who's currently the Florida Center for Independent Living. She's on the council in Florida, as well as accessibility.com, for being leaders in this space, because they see that as well. It's like we put someone in the job, let's say they have a business degree, or they have a rehabilitation degree or a law degree, and we put them in the job, and then they bring the solution to their leadership, and leadership's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. How do you overcome that? You have to build resilience to rejection, as my friend Tony in South Florida always likes to say. So that's really what we want to do. We want to just take the conversation to the next level. How do you implement this? How do you actually get it done?
How do you do it right? There's so many layers to it, but like once you get started, once you're having the right conversations, bring the right pieces of the puzzle to the table to start making decisions. It's not the complexity of it really, it doesn't become as complex once you approach it the right way. And then once you kind of ingrain it within the culture of your business or your government entity, it just becomes a natural conversation of thinking, and it doesn't become so new anymore. It just becomes, this is part of it. This is like our security protocol. This is our, communication. Like it becomes a part of the natural conversation of what you do every day.
Yeah.
And I do want to ask you a question. You spoke a lot about independent living.
Mm-hmm.
For the viewers that don't know, what is independent living? What does that mean, and why is it 50 years anniversary happening?
Yeah, so the independent living movement began there's some people may say that's not when it started, but based on, from a historical standpoint, from a documented standpoint, a lot of people would agree that it began in Berkeley, California. The independent living movement is the idea that persons with disabilities have the right to live their lives independently without barriers. So that's, ensuring that there are no barriers to transportation, to education, to housing, to government programs and services, to healthcare. All of which we all know that there are already barriers that exist. I mean, if you're a person with a disability that lives in a rural area, you have very limited access to transportation. Yet that may be the only place where accessible housing is. That's not independent living because you don't have a choice. If I live in this county and I receive services, or my parents live in this county, or my children live in this county, and I have to live here, but the accessible housing is on the northwest side, but all the jobs are on the farther east side, and there is no public transportation option. We've got to do better. We've got to find ways to modify our program services. So a good example of that would be reaching out to and I'm probably going to go too specific here, but when you're building let's say you're building a new city street, and you're zoning for commercial here, residential here, and you're assuming that one type of population should live in this zone and jobs should be in this zone, but you're not communicating with the commercial side of it or the transportation side of it. And what ends up happening is a situation where persons with disabilities can't get from A to B. That would be a barrier to transportation.
Be a major barrier.
Right. And you got to consider that the transportation alone, and folks get upset with the individual departments or agencies, but the transportation agency has its own federal requirements. They have areas that they're permitted to, and areas where there's limited transportation that isn't necessarily, there's no such thing as ADA routes, but there's not necessarily covered by the provisions of the ADA that require them to provide transportation. So it's just about advocating. For me, it's about advocating for a more inclusive planning process, more inclusive solutions, more buildings designed with a universal design, building our websites, understanding that our websites now are the primary means of communication in many ways. You can't take away something and then add something and not make it the equivalent level of service. 20 years ago, everyone called a 1-800 number to reach their companies, to put an order in. That got replaced by the websites, but what didn't happen is we didn't make sure that those websites were actually accessible for all people. So, that's, and to me, I feel like there's this track that innovation and independent living are on, that it's almost like independent living is always trying to catch up with innovation. A great example of that, of course, is the website replacing the phone, Uber replacing the taxi cabs, affordable housing more replacing accessible housing. Because I've done research on a lot of towns and cities where you see they have some type of provision in their 5-year plan, their CIP, that says that 3% of their housing will be accessible, 30% of their housing will be affordable. And they do that to address the homeless population, who also many have disabilities. But why is there only 3% accessible? Like who comes up with that number? You know what I mean? Where does that come from? And so to me, independent living is about removing those types of barriers and understanding that the advocacy isn't just saying what we need. It's also advocating to leaders beyond agency heads. Let's get a better, more inclusive planning process in the first place. And let's incorporate people with disabilities into all those solutions. The phrase "nothing about us without us" came from Poland in the 16th century. And it was about different political parties. And many of the Poles believed that decisions were being made on behalf of them without their input. And it's the same thing here. When it was used in the 90s, we're making policy decisions that affect Americans, but not incorporating some Americans in the process. That to me is independent living, incorporation.
I love that. These are the type of conversations that I love to have, because we're learning something, we're being able to take something where we include the community as having a part of the conversation. And when you do that, really good things happen. And for businesses, like what type of message what one message would you want to send to businesses and let them know from what we've been talking about today?
First I would say businesses that want to learn more about accessibility, of course, should visit accessibility.com. No, but
There you go.
I would just say that 24% of the population reports, and this number seems to, if you look at the CDC or if you look at the BLS, those numbers seem to, depending on whether you get them from a rural, or if you get them from a whole from the entire country, or if you base it on large metropolitan areas, that percentage seems to change. But you're missing out on a large percentage of the population if you're not incorporating people with disabilities. And so, one, for me, there's just three things. Of course, it's the right thing to do, but two, it's the law, and three, whoever cracks this market, and I don't say that in a way that necessarily means that it should be cracked before people have rights. I'd be the first person to tell you that they should just have the rights and access, and your business should just be accessible. But whoever truly understands this market at whatever time that comes, or whoever can really tap into the potential of understanding the needs of all of their customers and all people, I just believe they're going to be rewarded. And of course, that would not be the first argument I make. My first argument would be with it's the law, but I just believe that the benefits of incorporating all people and understanding that market far outweigh what they perceive to be a burden, which I don't, of course.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much today for joining us and having these conversations, and for everything that accessibility.com does. And recommend people to go check it out. There's a lot to learn over there. And just thank you for this. And Kevin, you have a beautiful
Yeah.
day. And for our viewers, until next time, I'll see
Thanks,
you
Josh.
soon.